Hello there, Ramblers, and welcome back to Reese Rambles, my weekly podcast all about the latest comings and goings, movings and shakings, and indeed all the rest of it in the worlds of vintage and retro computing, gaming, and technology. I hope you're all doing well out there, and you may have noticed already that I'm feeling a little bit more chipper this week on account of the fact that I am feeling much better past couple of weeks. Obviously, I talked about having a bit of a sore throat and stuff, but thankfully that does finally seem to have passed. And also the weather. I am wearing shorts again for the first time in weeks. I know you all enjoy my weather updates. In fact, I do see a noticeable drop-off in my analytics after my weather updates. It seems many of you tune in just for that, or perhaps they're just new people who click on it thinking it's going to be an interesting podcast about technology stuff and wonder what the hell I'm going on about in the first 30 seconds. But anyway, a gloriously hot and sunny day today in the UK, but apparently it is not set to last. It's going to cool down again and be wet and miserable again by the end of the weekend. But, oh well, that's the way it goes. Now, we have a big anniversary again this week. It seems like in all of these latest rambles, I've been talking about big important anniversaries in the computing world. We've had Windows 95 this year, of course. We've had, of course, the Amiga and the Atari ST, and we've had a few others as well, Monkey Island. Loads and loads of quite big, important anniversaries this year. And there is another one, and I didn't really want to talk about this as its own kind of story in its own right, so I'm going to dive straight into this just to acknowledge it. This is Windows Millennium Edition, and as you might guess from the name, it's 25 years old this week. It was released on September the 14th, 2000. Now, Windows Millennium Edition doesn't really have a great reputation as far as Windows releases go. But I must say, my experience of it back in the day was my dad actually bought. He had a company laptop which was a Sony Vaio. And it came with ME pre-installed. And I remember being very interested in it at the time because there was this big talk about it being, the first kind of Windows that didn't have DOS underpinning it. Of course, that isn't strictly true. I don't want to get into the technical details of Windows ME too much, but it was just kind of the final evolution of that kind of 9X family of Windows before, of course, we all went to XP and the NT kernel, the NT code base, which turns out was a very good move on Microsoft's part. And ME has this reputation of being quite unstable, not having great driver support, not great performance. It's not really gone down in history as one of the more fondly remembered versions of Windows. And I think that's a real shame because I have a special place in my heart for ME. Like I say, my experiences of it back in the day were actually generally very positive. And I even installed it on my desk PC here, and I actually use Windows ME. I use this machine quite a lot for my projects, for imaging disks and burning CDs, imaging floppy disks, that kind of thing. It's fully networked with all of my other kind of 9X and more modern machines. I have access to my NAS and everything as well. A really useful part of my workflow here when it comes to making my videos, and it's all running on Windows Millennium Edition. I kind of installed it as a bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing at first, but seems it runs great on that hardware. And I think that's the important thing as well. It's another thing that applies to, it also applies to Windows Vista, I think, which was another version of Windows that wasn't kind of quite so fondly remembered and does have a bit of a reputation. But actually, if you bought it pre-installed on a machine that was actually kind of optimized for that specific version of Windows, well, it was actually all around quite a good experience, and it only got better as Microsoft released more patches and things as time went on. But of course, ME was released kind of alongside Windows 2000. I think Windows 2000 came a little bit later, and I don't think anyone can argue that 2000 was not the stronger of the two releases. Much better security and, perhaps not as good support for games and things, but there you go, 25 years of Windows Millennium Edition. Now, here is a story on Heiser Online. Heiser? Is it Heiser Online? Something like that. By Peter Searing. And it's just celebrating, just marking the occasion. So on September the 14th, 2000, come on, get your words out, Reese, Microsoft released Windows ME, the last version of Windows based on the operating system Dinosaur MS-DOS. What was next? And there's a very nice kind of overview, a nice summary here of what ME was all about on the technical side of things, and of course the history of it, stuff like that. So if you're looking to just read up on the story behind Windows Millennium Edition, I can highly recommend this article, and of course it will be linked in the usual places. Those usual places being the description if you are watching this on YouTube, on my second channel, or of course in the show notes if you're listening to this on your podcast platform of choice. So, I'll just go through and pick out some bits and pieces from this, but it is quite a nice in-depth article, and it is well worth a bit of a read, perhaps on your on a tea break or something. Yeah, DOS or not DOS. One difference was much discussed. In Windows ME, Microsoft had actively hidden DOS. DOS, which was still necessary for starting, was no longer easily accessible to the user. All doors started from Windows as the sole operating system on the PC. MS-DOS mode, for example, for BIOS updates or for the use of DOS images were nailed shut. Of course, even before the release of the final version, there were tips for reviving DOS, but one thing remained: formatting a floppy disk no longer created a bootable DOS copy. So yeah, Microsoft's starting to rip DOS out of Windows, although it was still there in the background to some extent. It's talking a little bit about some of the innovations that were introduced in ME, stuff like system file protection and stuff like that, which of course were somewhat lacking in 9X. And, of course, the kind of integration with the internet side of things, which we'd started to see a little bit of in Windows 98, particularly Windows 98 SE, active desktop and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, Internet Explorer 4. I'm sure I don't need to explain all of that to you, but very much kind of more closely integrated in ME using Internet Explorer and stuff like that as part of the shell. And it was very much a product of that kind of 2000 era of internet-driven computing, the dawn of the dot-com era, for better or for worse. Anyway, I think I've waffled on far too much about Windows Millennium Edition, but just wanted to mark the occasion. Like I say, it is an operating system that I am somewhat of a fan of. If you are familiar with my work, you probably know that I do like my underdogs and my kind of lesser appreciated bits of technology and stuff like that. 25 years of Windows Millennium Edition this year. Not really any particular reason anyone would want to run it in this day and age. If you're looking for a kind of a DOS and early Windows 9X gaming machine, you're far better off running 98 SE, of course, because you still have access to that proper DOS mode and everything. And if you're looking for something a bit more modern, XP, very, very solid indeed. So sadly, not an operating system of much utility in 2025, although, like I said earlier, I am still putting it to great use and keeping its memory alive. There you go, 25 years of Windows ME. But first, I'd like to say a very quick thank you to our sponsor, PCBWay.com. Now, I'm sure you're probably already familiar with PCBWay, thanks to all of their wonderful support for this community, and indeed their 11 years of experience in the PCB fabrication business, with recent additional services being added, including stuff like 3D printing, injection molding, CNC machining, and sheet metal fabrication. Now, I wanted to show to you their fantastic online quote tool here. So you can specify the dimensions, how many layers you require, and all sorts of stuff to do with the type of finish that you need, the hole size, the silk screening, and even indeed the colour of solder mask that you require. And I should say they are offering a free upgrade to purple solder mask this month as well, which is very, very cool. And once you've been through all of that, you can get an instant quote. All of the prices are right there up front, completely transparent for you. And then you can upload your Gerbers and they will go ahead and quality check those. Very quickly turn those around and you'll have the PCBs on your doorstep in no time at all. So fantastic service, one that I've used myself both professionally and personally. And once more, I'd just like to say a very big thank you to PCBWay for sponsoring Rees Rambles and indeed my main channel, Control-Alt-Rees. But with that out of the way, let's get on with the stories. And speaking of big tech anniversaries, this next story isn't about one of those in particular, but it does concern a piece of hardware which coincidentally is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. I say coincidentally, of course. This is a thing that has been done to mark that occasion, and it is a piece of hardware that I have talked about in my rambles before, and I have also covered it on my second channel in the form of an emulator for the Nintendo 3DS. Now, I'm talking, of course, about the Virtual Boy, Nintendo's also much maligned console from 1995, and their first foray, I think it's fair to say, into the world of 3D. So it had the stand thing that you could set up on the desk and like the headset, and you basically put your face up to it like that. Or I guess you could just hold it if you wanted to, although there was the controller, wasn't there? Yeah, I don't have a huge amount of real-life experience with the Virtual Boy, but It was very well known for giving people headaches and all kinds of muscle strains, neck aches, and that kind of thing. And didn't really last all that long. Didn't really have all that many games released for it. But I do still think quite an historically important console. And it seems that Nintendo agrees, because this week they have announced that Virtual Boy games are coming to Nintendo Switch Online. Of course, we had the launch of the Switch 2 earlier this year, Nintendo's fantastic handheld console that you can also plug into a dock and use with your TV. Best of both worlds. I'm a huge fan of the Switch, as I'm sure you know. And they've announced that there's going to be a range of 14 games, 14 Virtual Boy games coming to the Switch 2. Now, I just want to show to you how this is going to work. So this is a story over on The Verge, but there is an embedded YouTube video here as well. And I think it's quite important that we actually watch this, or at least a part of this. It's only 1 minute and 21 seconds long, and see how this is actually going to work with the console, because I really love the way that they've done this. So we've got a bit of footage of some games and things, and we've got some nice shots of the hardware. And when I say hardware, you would be forgiven for thinking that this was an original Virtual Boy, but it's not. It's modelled on the original Virtual Boy, but it's actually a kind of Nintendo Switch and Switch 2 dock. So you slot your Switch into it, and you put your face up to it, and it essentially works in the same way as the Virtual Boy. I guess there's some kind of special lenses, some kind of stereoscopic 3D effect going on with this. And yeah, we've got the full list of 14 games here, so they're not all released initially. There will be kind of a timed release, but we've got Wario Land, the Virtual Boy version of Wario Land, which is an excellent game. I have played it on that Red Viper emulator on the 3DS. We've got Galactic Pinball, Red Alarm, Tele-Roboxer, Mario Tennis, of course, another excellent game. I'd read the whole list, but it's up here on screen for your perusal, and of course this will be linked as well in the usual places. We've got Space Invaders, Tetris. A really good selection of games. Virtual Bowling, I have practically read all of them out now, haven't I? So this is coming on February the 17th next year, 2026, and you do need Nintendo Switch Online with the expansion pack, and of course, also, as you might imagine, the extra hardware is quite pricey. You do need to purchase it separately. But as we can see in this video, there is a cardboard option as well, like the Nintendo Labo thing that was released, or Labo. Is it Labo or Labo? I don't know. One of those sounds a little bit obscene. But we'll go back to the Verge story, because that does have all of the details here. So, Virtual Boy games are coming to Nintendo Switch Online by Andrew Webster. Nintendo's Optima-aligned VR headset, the Virtual Boy, is getting a new life on modern hardware. Nintendo announced that the platform will be coming to its collection of retro games available to Switch Online subscribers, and will be available on both the Switch and the Switch 2, which is really cool to see their kind of previous gen still being supported. In order to play these games, you'll need a dedicated headset accessory, which looks just like the original hardware, but lets you slot in the Switch or Switch 2 tablet for viewing the games. A cardboard model will also be available, which sounds similar to the Labo VR headset. The main accessory is $99.99. Or if that's a bit too pricey for you, you can buy the cardboard version for $24.99. And these are the official prices from Nintendo's website. I couldn't find any pricing for the UK or the EU, but I imagine it's probably going to be extortionately expensive here, as you might imagine. And of course, the story on The Verge also mentions the 14 games that will be available over time. No information from Nintendo as to how that kind of stage release is going to be working. But I would have thought they'd at least release Mario Tennis and some of the kind of better known ones initially to go along with the big launch on February the 17th. But this all looks very exciting, doesn't it? I think it's a very difficult system to preserve and kind of emulate, I think, because the big selling point was that 3D effect. And the Nintendo 3DS, of course, I think is a fantastic way to experience those games, and you can actually pick those up very cheaply nowadays. You can jailbreak them quite easily. I have to be careful what I talk about here. Nintendo being famously quite litigious, even when it comes to their old, outdated platforms. And you can kind of sideload stuff onto that using an SD card very easily. All covered in my video. I will link to that, and then you can experience those games in that way. But if you want a more official way to do it, and particularly with that plastic accessory as well, that kind of full-size official hardware, which does look really, really cool, So cool to see Nintendo supporting this. I know they are, they do get their fair share of criticism, and quite fairly in a lot of cases. This is actually a really cool project, and a very cool thing for game preservation as well. So, yeah, well done, Nintendo. Looks very good. So while we are on the topic of weird and wonderful, obscure Nintendo hardware, another rather interesting project has come across my desk in my past week, and I thought this was also of interest too. So let's also cover this one, and this is again to do with another one of my favourite Nintendo platforms, the Game Boy, of course, a platform that I have also covered quite extensively on my channels, and rightfully so, one of my favourite consoles of all time. But yeah, this is, this is a bit of a weird twist on the old formula, I will say. So I will let timeextension.com explain this in their own words. A story here by Damien McFerrin. Pokemon Mini gets Game Boy emulation, complete with Rumble support. So this is all about the Pokemon Mini console, which was released in 2001. Pretty much completely unheard of outside of Japan, I will say. And unfortunately, a very short-lived thing. Again, I guess along the same lines as the Virtual Boy, only had 10 official releases. And now, apparently there is some kind of homebrew scene around this console, and you can now play Game Boy games on it. If you want to play Game Boy games on a really tiny handheld console from 2001, why not? So, released all the way back in 2001, the Pokemon Mini is one of Nintendo's most unique portable projects, and one which perhaps didn't hit the commercial heights you might have expected. A dinky monochrome handheld which ran even dinkier cartridges, the Pokemon Mini only saw 10 official releases during its lifespan, and is often overlooked when discussing Nintendo's handheld history. Thankfully, the homebrew community hasn't forgotten about this tiny device, and we have developer Zwenergy Zero to thank for a new Game Boy emulator for the system. And, so what's going on here? Apparently, Twitter's being blocked. There we go. We've got some footage here. We've got some videos and things of this actually in action, which I suppose I should show to you. So this is the Pokemon Mini console, as we can see from Zwenergy over on Twitter, over on x.com. And it's looking really nice. You can see how tiny this thing is in the developer's hands. There's also a link to the GitHub repo as well, and apparently there's a browser-based patcher that actually allows you to load up your own Game Boy ROMs as well, which is really cool. Looks like a very streamlined process, which is good to see. But as we can see, if we are watching this video, it's all running rather nicely, isn't it? It looks quite nice on that tiny little screen, and performance is looking very good indeed. So, yeah, all round a very cool project. Let's go back to Time Extension anyway. Dubbed the GB Mini, this emulator allows you to play monochrome Game Boy games on your Pokemon Mini. The emulator is running on the PM2040 flash cart, explains Zwenergy Zero. As the PM has built-in Rumble, Game Boy Rumble games like Pokemon Pinball use the PM's Rumble, and save games are supported as well. Now, it does mention that audio emulation isn't working yet, although it is being worked on, so it should hopefully be coming very soon. And the story just concludes by saying, all of which means the Pokemon Mini is now a more pocket-friendly option when it comes to playing classic Game Boy titles on the move. But as you can see from the demonstration videos, the in-game text is pretty difficult to read on that 96 by 64 pixel display. Yeah, I suppose that's quite an important consideration. But still, cool to see these homebrew projects, and when it's around kind of weird and wonderful hardware like this that's kind of otherwise been forgotten by history, I think it's definitely something to be celebrated. So yeah, if you are one of the handful of people out there who are lucky enough to own a Pokemon Mini and indeed a flash cart for it, why not give some Game Boy games a try? Anyway, onwards and upwards from all of that Nintendo stuff, it's time to talk about some PC stuff, some classic PC DOS gaming, and as you may have spotted, the eagle-eyed among you, a prop has appeared on my desk in that way that they tend to do. This is Screamer. This is a box copy of the game Screamer for MS-DOS, of course, a huge racing game on the PC back in the day, and also a personal favourite of mine, one that I have covered on the channel quite a few times, and one that I have talked about quite a few times as well in these rambles. And, of course, Screamer is being rebooted. It's a story that I covered quite a while back on Reese Rambles, and there hasn't really been much news on this in quite a while. They were doing some kind of weird anime-inspired thing, and there was like a teaser trailer a few months back, and yeah, it's all been quite quiet on that front. So I am very pleased to report that there has been some more information about the upcoming Screamer reboot this week, and I must say, I am intrigued. I'm still not quite sure what to make of all of this. They are doing something very interesting with it, but hey, why not? Why not? So, this is a story over on Polygon.com. Anime-inspired driving game Screamer fuses arcade racers with fighting game mechanics. That's right, MotoGP and Hot Wheels Unleashed developer reimagines its PC racing classic. Story here by Michael McWhirter. I didn't expect Screamer, the anime-inspired revival of Milestone's 90s racing game series, to give such strong fighting game vibes. But there are shades of Tekken, Street Fighter, and the King of Fighters to Screamer, an arcade-style racer that also surprises with its implementation of an unusual twin-stick driving style. Does this not get even more intriguing with every single sentence? I have to say, I couldn't not cover this. And another big surprise, one of the racers in Screamer is a sassy corgi. The original Screamer looked a lot like the arcade competition, e.g. Ridge Racer Daytona USA, when it was released on MS-DOS in 1995. Another 30th anniversary, wow. That Screamer was bright and colourful, offering high-speed races with plenty of drifting and intense crashes. The new Screamer, due out in 2026, hits similar beats, but is much more technical and stylish, leaning into a not quite cel-shaded anime aesthetic. But to address the first surprise, yes, the new Screamer is a twin-stick racer. When racing with a controller, you use the left analog stick to steer your car and the right analog stick to drift. Trying this control scheme myself on a PlayStation 5 DualSense, I found it took some getting used to, but having independent control of both steering and drift eventually clicked. This is so intriguing, isn't it? It uses a gear shifting system that's seemingly inspired by Gears of War's active reloading mechanic, if you remember that. So vehicles in Screamer will automatically shift to higher gears, but if you manually shift upward at just the right moment, illustrated by a tachometer in the lower left corner of the screen, that's a rev counter to you and me, it changes from blue to orange when the time is right, you'll get a speed boost. Wrangling the two control schemes for steering and drifting and active gear shifting feels a lot to manage at first, and drivers also have to manage a pair of meters as part of Screamer's ecosystem, which powers mechanics like boosting, shields, and KOing other racers. As players race, they'll build up their sync meter, which can be used for speed boosts, or to activate shields that dampen impacts and protect your car from enemy attacks. As you use sync, you'll build up entropy, which powers attack moves like strike and overdrive. Basically an ultimate ability that literally smashes through the competition. Overdrive is a big risk-reward move. You'll go hyper fast but have no brakes. Both you and your opponents are vulnerable in overdrive. But there's more. There's another layer to Screamer's mechanics, the racers themselves. Each character in the game's diverse international lineup has his or her own strengths, weaknesses, and racing personality. Some race at higher speeds or be more vulnerable in overdrive. Others earn sync meter slower or faster than others. Some might be dogs. But they all come in groups of 3 with a team-based structure similar to SNK's King of Fighters, united by aesthetic or allegiance. And of course, it goes to mention that there is a whole story as well, which will be uncovered as the game progresses. Obviously, the story, each kind of team has its own unique story and stuff as well. And it says that the narrative introduces players to the complex layered mechanics over time. So it's not just going to throw everything straight at you when you first fire up the game. But yeah, the more I hear about this game, the more intriguing it gets. I guess we'll take a look at this gameplay trailer. I did show this in a previous Ramble a few months ago. I say gameplay trailer, it's more of a kind of a teaser, kind of an announcement trailer, but it does kind of show the aesthetic that they're going for here. So, we've got all these bright colours and stuff. Of course, this is pre-alpha footage, so I would expect a lot more effects and explosions and stuff like that. But very, very fast-paced, of course, arcade racing style. We can see that drifting in action here in these kind of anime-inspired cityscapes and car designers and things. We've got a bit of a takedown there. If you remember the Burnout games, it'd be nice to have that kind of style of game back. Of course, we've got Wreckfest now, which I am a huge fan of, as you probably know. The more I hear about this, the more intriguing it gets, I must say. And looks like it's going to be very, very different to anything we've seen before in a racing game. And I think that is something to be celebrated and something to be applauded if they do manage to pull it off, of course, and not do it in too much of an annoying way. But of course, Screamer was known for being quite a revolutionary game back in its day in '95 on DOS. It did spawn a couple of sequels as well. So of course we had Screamer 2, Screamer Rally, and all very kind of highly regarded and quite technically impressive games in their own right. So I guess it all makes sense. Anyway, if you want to brush up on the original Screamer, it is available through GOG, and I would highly, highly recommend it. You can buy it through GOG. It comes all packaged with the with DOSBox and everything else, so you can just play it on your modern machine. And yeah, as for the new Screamer, it'll be out sometime in 2026 on PlayStation 5, Windows PC, and the Xbox Series X. No word of a Switch release, which, I would have thought this style of game would go down quite nicely on the Switch, but you never know, might be announced a bit later on. But yeah, if and when I do buy it, if those early reviews look good, and I do like a good arcade racer, yeah, I think I'll be picking it up on the PC. So this year has seen the triumphant return of two much-loved 8-bit computing brands from the 1980s. Of course, we've had the Ultimate C64, whatever it's called, the C64 Ultimate from the freshly rebooted Commodore, as kind of headed up by Perry Fractic, the YouTuber, which is a story I have talked about a fair bit in the past, so we're not going to go into too much detail on that again. And of course, we've also seen another run of the Spectrum Next, which has been massively successful for them. I think the Kickstarter has very recently finished, and they basically smashed all of their records. Don't have the figures here in front of me, but yeah, I think the third Kickstarter for the Spectrum Next was also a massive success. So a lot of interest in these rebooted 8-bit machines, of course, and in this history, this Commodore and Sinclair history. So as you might expect, of course, lots of merchandising and tie-in opportunities, lots of spin-off opportunities, particularly with Christmas on the way. But I must say, this isn't one that I saw coming. So here's a story over on retronews.com about perfume. That's right. So From Pixels to Perfume is a new range of fragrances in what must be one of the oddest collaborations we've seen. The 4 new perfumes are inspired by retro computers of the 80s, including the Commodore 64 and the classic Specky. The official range has been released in conjunction with Andrews UK, which has promised to get them shipped out to customers before Christmas 2025. Each exceptional scent in the From Pixels to Perfume range combines the fun and playful nostalgia of retro gaming with the satisfaction of smelling and feeling good. With packaging designs that nod to the classic home computers that inspired them, these are more than just fragrances. Each 100ml bottle is a wearable collectible. And yeah, I think, if you've ever been to any of these shows or these conventions and things, these retro gaming and computing events, I think, nice fragrance is perhaps something that, more of us could benefit from. Anyway, in a press statement, Andrews UK said the golden age of gaming has never smelled so good. In a company first, Andrews UK is pleased to share a brand new collection of limited edition premium fragrances inspired by some of the most iconic retro gaming consoles. The C64, I think you'll find they're computers, but anyway. The C64, the Spectrum, the ZX80 and the ZX81. So strange to see the ZX80 getting some recognition, but I'm certainly not going to complain. So the C64 fragrance Pour Homme, powerful and sophisticated with citrus, florals and a rich patchouli musk base. That sounds pretty good, actually. Spectrum fragrance Pour Homme, apologies to the French people in the audience. A bold signature of a vibrant bergamot, woody warmth and musky depth. ZX80 Eau de Parfum. Parfum? Eau de Parfum? I need to channel my inner Frenchman. Elegant and feminine with sparkling florals, soft fruits and creamy vanilla musk. And the ZX81 Pour Homme, a refined masculine blend of lavender, leather and aromatic freshness. Yeah, so there you go. Packaging looks cool. The bottles look very stylish indeed, I will say. And if the descriptions are anything to go by, they all sound like they smell pretty nice, actually. So, very good. Oh, I just spotted this story is by Faith as well. I've followed Faith for a very long time. Shout out to Faith. Very cool. So, just a bit of a press release that these things are going to be available. Let's just click through to the website and see if we can find any more information on these. Yes, here we go. So we've got some pricing here on these as well. We've got a couple of bundles. So we've got the C64 and the Spectrum bundle, which is £49.99. We've got the ZX81 and ZX80 bundle. The ZX80 being marketed specifically for women, of course, as we saw from the press release, a bit more of a feminine fragrance. And that's, again, that's £49.99 here in the UK. Or if you want to buy one of the different fragrances individually, they are £29.99 each, which actually, I think is actually quite reasonable. Yeah, they also apparently do a Thunderbirds Lady Penelope fragrance. I had no idea about this going in, but yeah, if you're a Thunderbirds fan, there's also that. So that's cool. But yeah, fragrances inspired by 8-bit home computers of the 1980s. I must admit, that was not on my bingo card for 2025, but yeah, you know, with all the much-deserved renewed interest in the likes of the Commodore 64 and the Spectrum this year, why not? Why not? Seems like a very cool project. So a bit of an update on a previous story from earlier this year next, and also a good opportunity for me to butcher some more French pronunciation. So this is to do with the Louvre in Paris, of course, a famous museum. And it was announced earlier this year that they were retiring their interactive guide system, which has been running for 13 years, since 2012. And the reason this is noteworthy is because this was actually running on the Nintendo 3DS. So if you visited the Louvre and you wanted the interactive guide, you can actually pay a little bit extra and they would give you a 3DS with you know, some custom software running on it that had a guide to all of the various artworks and things in the museum that you could wander around and actually use. And I guess because of that hardware being no longer supported, no longer officially available, they have finally had to make the transition to something else. But no one was really sure when it was going to be specifically or what they were going to be moving to. And those details are now available, as this has now happened on the 1st of September. So this is a story from Smithsonian Magazine, from Sarah Cooter. The Louvre stops renting out Nintendo 3DS consoles, which helped visitors navigate the massive museum for 13 years. Available since 2012, the handheld gadgets are being retired in favour of a new system. But so far, the Paris Museum hasn't revealed any details about the replacement. And we can actually see this thing, we can see a bit of a picture of this thing in action here. So we've got a few buttons with a few options on the bottom touch screen. We've got a picture of the actual exhibit itself on the top on the bigger screen, and of course it looks like you can tap on these and it will actually play an audio description of what it is you're looking at, presumably with different you know, language options and things. And I can see there's also a voir on the 3D, or a 3D, I guess it is in French, of course, view in 3D. So there are of course making use of the 3DS hardware there, 3D renders or 3D views of the various different objects in the museum. So yeah, a bit of a shame to see this retired. I don't know if this has ever been kind of leaked or released as a homebrew thing, or might be something quite interesting to explore at home on your own 3DS. If that's a thing, don't know. Should probably look into that. Anyway, for the past decade, visitors to the Louvre could rent a Nintendo 3DS console for personalised tours, audio commentary and additional information about more than 700 artworks at the famed Paris Museum. Now the Louvre is getting rid of the handheld gadgets, reports Le Monde's Pierre Trouvé. On September the 1st, the Nintendo 3DS consoles were retired to make way for a new audio guide, according to the museum's website. The Louvre and Nintendo began working together in 2012 in what Vice's Luis Prada describes as one of the most bizarre but charming cultural crossovers. At the time, the museum replaced its traditional audio guides with 5,000 Nintendo 3DS handheld consoles, which had debuted a year earlier. The interactive gadgets were loaded with more than 30 hours of audio commentary, plus a multimedia library featuring videos, images, and 3D models of some of the museum's artwork. Per Art News' Harrison Jacobs, the devices also used geolocation to create custom tours based on users' positions within the museum. I like that. They were available for €6 or about $7 per visit and included information in English, French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, German, Japanese, Korean and Chinese, according to Engadget's Mariella Moon. The new offering was so popular that in 2013, Nintendo created a downloadable Louvre guide for fans to purchase and use remotely. If only I'd read this article before I did my intro. Hey, all of my questions would have been answered. Anyway, company executives also starred in a 12-minute Nintendo Direct video about the partnership, and indeed the video is embedded here, but we're not going to sit and watch a 12-minute video. That will be linked, of course, in the usual places if you want to go and check that out. So it just goes on to report that in 2020, the 3DS was, of course, discontinued as the Switch started to gain traction. And, museums nowadays are offering their own apps, their own personal apps. Of course, everyone has their own smartphone in their pocket nowadays, so that makes perfect sense. Just provide the software and let the user bring their own platform, I guess. But it says that they haven't revealed any information about the replacement, but they are in a bit of a transitionary period at the moment through October the 21st. When they have actually gone back to the old school audio guides, which is a bit of a shame. I guess whatever replacement system they had in the works wasn't quite ready, and they've just kind of run out of working 3DSs, I guess. So, a bit more information about visitor figures and staff going on strike and all that kind of stuff. Of course, it's French. Of course, they're going to be on strike at any given moment. But that is that. The Nintendo 3DS guides at the Louvre Museum in Paris have officially been retired as of September the 1st. They've gone back to the old school audio guides, but it seems that hopefully by October the 21st there will be some kind of new exciting platform announced. I'm guessing it's probably going to be something smartphone based, as that is kind of alluded to in the article. Very much the end of an era. I wonder if these consoles, I mean, it says, what did it say? There were 5,000 of them. I wonder if any of those will be making their way onto the collector's market, perhaps. A real piece of history. I imagine they're pretty much very, very battered by this point, having been used by thousands and thousands of tourists over the years. Yeah, a bit of a sad thing, but hey, such a cool experiment, and it's very impressive that it's lasted for 13 years. Doom. That's right, I'm going to talk about Doom again, a game that gets rather a lot of mentions and shout-outs in these rambles. Every little piece of Doom-related news I can get my hands on, of course, I need to relay to you. Being a huge fan of the game, and indeed of the entire series myself, starting with the original Doom, which came on we had the shareware version with our first PC, a 486 DX266, way back in 1994. And I've been very much enjoying the latest reboots as well, the latest installments in the series, apart from the Dark Ages, the latest one, which I haven't actually played yet, and I'm still a bit on the fence about whether I should try it. I think I'm waiting to pick it up in a Steam sale. But of course, I do have the Doom Shrine here, and unlike recent episodes where I've had a huge, great monitor in the way, you can actually just about see it here behind the PC that I'm working on at the moment for my current video, which... No, we won't talk about that just yet. Hashtag no spoilers. But there has actually been a rather interesting piece of news this week concerning the original Doom. And I know that these stories are usually about someone porting it to some weird and wonderful platform. Recently we have had it running on, I think a pregnancy test was probably the weirdest one that I've seen. I ran it myself on my desk PC. Not that that's particularly noteworthy because it is just a PC built into a desk. But this isn't about that at all. This is about a new finding to do with Doom, with the original game engine, and a bit of a limitation in the original version of Doom, which is going to have severe limits. It's going to severely impact our enjoyment of the game and limit the time that we can spend playing the game. Because, I'm sure many of us are prone to these lengthy sessions of Doom. But yeah, it seems there is an upper limit as to how long the game will run. So anyway, without further ado, that's rather a lot of waffle, isn't it? PCGamer.com is reporting, this is Jacob Ridley, that someone ran Doom to see how long it takes to crash out. It took 2.5 years. So there you go. If you're planning on playing Doom for longer than 2.5 years, very important to bear this in mind, which is roughly the same time frame required to break many a retro game. And this story is quite interesting in that it mentions some other games as well, which of course we will talk about in a second, that have this upper limit due to internal counters and things being incremented and then them obviously eventually overflowing. And of course, when they were testing these games, nobody thought to run them for 2.5 years to see if they would eventually crash. I guess that would have massively delayed the launch of them as well. So these are only kind of quite recently being discovered. Anyway, have you ever sat there and thought to yourself, I wonder how long Doom would take to crash if I left it running indefinitely? Well, someone already did and carried out the necessary testing to find out the answer. Phew, we can all rest easy tonight. We can thank user Minky over at Lenovo for running these tests. They booted up Doom on an old PDA, expecting it to crash at some point. That's because every time the game demo would run and then reset, the engine would store a new variable. Then it would start up again and again, store a new variable, all in one long string, until, blammo, it had crashed due to an overflow, the data exceeding the possible bounds of the value used to store it. Though how long it would take to crash was all theoretical, until it wasn't. Not a great technical explanation there, but that's fine. I'm sure you get the gist. Minky ran a physical test on an old PDA. So is this the original DOS version running under an emulator? Or I guess running it on an old PDA makes sense, for like power consumption purposes and stuff like that. If you're going to leave the thing physically on for over 2 years, it makes sense for it not to be, full-blown 486 PC. I can't imagine there's many 30-year-old PCs that would actually run for 2.5 years continuously. But anyway, doesn't really matter because this is to do with a limitation in the original engine. So, of course, it just mentions here that we've had Doom running in a PDF file and a badge for a hacking conference or even its own box. Yes, that was one we talked about recently, wasn't it? The new boxed collectible Doom release from Limited Run, which actually includes a playable version of Doom built into the box itself. So the game crashed only hours after the 2.5-year mark, proving that the variable did indeed overflow and cause the expected hard crash of the game, Minky says. And in the comments over at Hacker News, some intrigued onlookers noted a few other examples of similar proclivities in older games. So Crash Bandicoot 3 will run for a little over 2 years, and then the global timer will overflow, which causes enemies to move backwards through time, objects to freeze, and some levels to break altogether. And there is a video of this as well, which is linked from this article if you want to go and check that out. There's a sword in Final Fantasy IX that can only be earned if the player reaches the final dungeon in under 12 hours of game time. That, or they play long enough to overflow the internal clock counter. You can reset the timer and grab the sword, and that takes around 2 years, again, of unbroken playtime. And this has earned the sword the title of Missable Within Reason on the Final Fantasy fandom, as it's not technically missable. There's also another famous case involving a cake in Paper Mario. In the game, you have to try to bake a perfect cake. To do so, you need to leave it in the oven for around 30 seconds. However, if you leave the game for long enough, a mere 4.5 years, you get a perfectly baked cake every time. That's because the timer storing how long the cake has been cooking for exceeds its maximum value and, luckily, in this instance, resets. And it just goes on to say that the values stored in an integer may vary depending on whether it's signed, unsigned, or depending on how many bits there are. And as shown to various degrees here, you can exceed those values. And of course, then they overflow back to zero, which can cause all sorts of interesting game-breaking behaviour. But yes, in the case of Doom, as per this story, 2.5 years if you leave Doom running and leave it running through those demos. Of course, I think there are 3 demos in Doom that just loop endlessly. After 2.5 years, the game will just crash. And that's that. So, useful to know. As you may know, I have been covering the ongoing saga of the Stop Killing Games movement here on Rees Ramble. StopKillingGames.com, of course, started by Cursed Farms, that wonderful YouTube channel, and a bit of a coordinated global effort to stop game publishers from basically shutting down their games and making them unplayable after a short period of time. You can go out and buy these boxed copies of these games completely unaware of the fact that the game won't actually function anymore because it is tied to some kind of online service or function. And at the very least, this movement has been trying to pressure governments to at least at the very least, get these publishers to publish this information on the games themselves and say, okay, well, we will support this game for 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or whatever. This is the date that it's going to shut down. That's the absolute worst case scenario that they are going for. But of course, in an ideal world, it would be great if, publishers could, make the software, the server side open source, or at least available to the community, at least documented, so that could be picked up by the community to continue to be supported, or at least release a patch or something that would allow these games to continue to be played offline. I don't know, it's, there's varying degrees to it in the way that it could be implemented. Some better than others, and just at the very least, it would be nice if you could buy a game and be safe in the confidence that that thing that you have bought will always work properly. I mean, is that too much to ask? That's kind of the general gist of the Stop Killing Games movement. And I keep saying movement. I think the word I'm looking for is campaign. But anyway, part of this has involved petitioning various governments, as mentioned. So there has been a bit of, I think there was an effort in the US that got shut down. And unfortunately, that's now in a position where it can't really be revisited for various legal and process reasons. The EU was looking like the most promising approach that I've reported on quite recently. They seem to actually be taking that quite seriously, as they do with consumer protection laws and stuff. Thankfully, we voted very sensibly to stay in the EU when we had the chance. All right. Anyway, and the UK government as well, of course. There was a petition on the UK government website, parliament.uk. And the law here is that essentially once a petition gets over 100,000 signatures, they do actually have to debate it and make a decision based upon it in Parliament, which is quite a good system. Apart from the fact that we had pretty much got the signatures, and then the previous government called a general election, and that wipes the entire slate clean and restarts the process from scratch. Anyway, if you have signed this petition, which run for 6 months, by the way, if you have signed this petition, as I did, you will have received an email this week because it has actually achieved the requisite number of signatures. And the people, obviously the government in Parliament, will actually be debating this. And part of that is that they have to select a date and they have to make everyone aware of what that date is. There are ways of actually live streaming these debates from Parliament if you are incredibly bored and want to watch that kind of thing. And I think there was a BBC Parliament channel at one point. Is that still a thing that just had like 24/7 live coverage from Parliament? Is that still a thing? I don't know. Probably on Sky TV now. Anyway, they are going to be debating this on the 3rd of November 2025, which is really cool to see. It's got 189,888 signatures. And all it's asking is that the government should update consumer law to prohibit publishers from disabling video games and related game assets and features they have already sold without recourse for customers to retain or repair them. We seek this as a statutory consumer right. So, not asking for anything too specific, just at least some kind of degree of consumer protection so people can at least, continue to play those games or indeed, keep them running. New operating systems get released and stuff like that. So, yeah, really interesting to see that this is going to be debated. Now, I will say the government did respond to this much earlier on this year, and they said that there were no plans to amend UK consumer law on disabling video games. Those selling games must comply with existing requirements in consumer law, and we will continue to monitor this issue. And there is a kind of a much lengthier, more detailed response, which people did pick apart at the time, and I believe I reported on that at the time. Interesting to see what is going to happen. Of course, the fact that they debate it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to introduce any kind of new laws or make any major changes. They could just debate it and then say, no, actually, we don't want to do anything about this. But hey, it's the democratic process that we have given to us in this country, and the best we can do is at least follow the process and use the tools that we are given by the government. So, I will keep an eye on this, and of course, I will report on it when it happens around the, whenever the next Ramble will be after the 3rd of November. Very interesting to see, but if nothing else, quite heartening to see that second time round, after the first one was completely abandoned, did manage to pretty much double the required number of signatures for this. So evidently there is quite a lot of interest in this. And as previously reported, of course, a very similar attempt happening in the EU as well. So there is hope yet for Stop Killing Games. We'll see how the debate goes. And hopefully I will be back to you with at least some positive news sometime around early November. And that, my dearest ramblers, brings us around quite neatly to my regular video of the week feature, wherein I feature a video that I have seen here on the YouTubes in the previous week that has entertained, educated, enlightened, or otherwise improved my life in some small way. Quite often they are retro computer, vintage gaming, whatever you want to call it, related. Quite often they aren't. Quite often there's just one, but it seems more often than not just lately there is more than one, and I'm very pleased to report that is also the case this week. I have 3 videos for you this week. There is a retro gaming related video about one of my favourite games, Wonder if you can guess which game it is. There's a technology video from a very good tech channel, which you almost certainly would have heard of, but I found it very interesting indeed. So if it's one that's passed you by, I highly recommend you go and give that a watch. And thirdly, I have something a bit out of left field, a bit different. This one isn't computing or gaming related, but it is very much retro, and it's something that I have a really interesting personal story all about, and I think you'll enjoy that one. A bit of Reese lore that most people aren't familiar with, and probably the opening chapter in my upcoming autobiography. If I was working on a autobiography, maybe I should. Don't know. Anyway, so let's get on with these videos. So the first one is all about Doom, and this is from a channel called Decino, not a channel that I'd watched in the past, I must admit, at least not knowingly. But yeah, 200,000 plus subscribers, so evidently quite a big channel, and yeah, it's reflected in the quality of this video, really well put together. And it's something I'd never really considered before. So this is to do with all of the soft locks in Doom and Doom 2. So this is Ultimate Doom and Doom 2. And what this actually means by soft locks is places where it's possible to get stuck in those games, where you have to either die and restart the level, although that's not always possible in the case of some of these, or indeed reload your previous save to attempt it again. And it turns out that actually the first episode of Doom, the shareware episode, which I do know pretty much inside and out, there aren't really any at all. There's like one or two places where you could feasibly get stuck if you save in the wrong place and if the stars align correctly. But actually, those levels were very kind of extensively play tested and put together. Of course, it put all of their best work into the shareware episode to try to convince people to buy the full game. And it turns out that actually that kind of backfired a little bit, because the shareware episode of Doom is absolutely fantastic. And to be honest, it's all you really need. But that's just me speaking. I was really intrigued to see this and to see some of these are really obscure, and you do need some quite interesting combinations of circumstances, although Decino does explain in this video how those circumstances might come about and how you might actually get stuck forever. And some of them are just like, how on earth did they miss that in playtesting? Stuff like single-use switches, where you hit a switch, something opens, you walk out of a room, it closes again, and then you can't get back and use the switch again, stuff like that. And I just thought it was, of course it is great to learn new stuff about Doom after all these years, as someone who considers himself to know the games inside and out pretty well. There was certainly some new stuff in here on me, and some very creative ways of interacting with these levels and moving around that I thought was very cool. And just a really nicely made video, very well put together and very well told, which I always appreciate. It's 19 minutes and 25 seconds long, and I actually sat and watched this on my TV the other night. So that is that. But if Doom or indeed gaming is not your bag, I have a technology-related video from the wonderful Jeff Geerling. And are there many people out there who don't love Jeff? He's a lovely chap. Great part of the community, and this is a full-blown 28.5 minute long video all about CubeSats. So small cube-sized satellites that you can actually build yourself at home, and you can get them launched into space for a mere, I think he said something like $85,000, which I admit is quite a lot of money, but as explained in the video, it used to be hundreds of millions of dollars to launch anything into space. We've got Mark Rober here, who of course has his own CubeSat as well, and there's some information about that project and how you can interact with that. There's a whole website and everything. I wasn't aware of that, but yeah, really cool project. But, space stuff, Raspberry Pi based stuff, and it's just fascinating, isn't it? And he talks about, obviously, if you don't have the budget to build one of these things and get it launched into space, he also talks about using software-defined radios, which you can get for next to nothing on Amazon or wherever else. Little USB device, hook it up to an antenna, plug it into your computer, and you can actually receive all the signals from all of these thousands of CubeSats that are out there, all these little student projects and stuff like that orbiting the Earth. And Jeff does explain how you can get into that world as well and pick up the signals being broadcast by all of these different satellites. So I thought this was a fascinating video. I love space stuff. I could listen to Jeff talk about anything because, like I say, he's a lovely chap. And Raspberry Pi connection as well. So that's called Pies in Space, and as mentioned, it is 28.5 minutes long. Oh yeah, the tape measures for antennas as well. I thought this was brilliant, and how that works. A really, really simple solution to what is quite a complex problem. Loads of stuff like that as well in this video as well. A couple of kind of experts in this field involved and kind of interviewed in this. Yeah, so that's Pies in Space, of course. All the videos of the week will be linked, got satellites on the brain, down in the usual places for you to check out, as always. So what's this third video, this mystery video with the personal connection, the non-computing related one with the autobiographical story connected to it? Well, this is a car video, a retro car video. This is Johnny Smith of Top Gear fame, of course, a British motoring journalist. Again, a really nice chap. I've been following him for years and his stuff, although I must admit I am not a religious viewer of his channel. I do watch some of his stuff when it pops up and it looks of interest, but this one was very much of interest. So I need to hit play on this so we're not just sat here staring at his face. It's called Revealing My Rare Barn Find Project Car, in brackets, it needs a lot of work, which, as you'll see from the video, is a bit of an understatement. But this is another half an hour long video, another one I sat and watched on my TV with great interest. And the reason that this was of particular interest to me was the car involved. So this is a car called the Matra Rancho, which you've probably not heard of, and you'd be forgiven for not hearing of it. Not a huge seller in its time anyway. And it turns out there's only 3 of them left on the roads here in the UK. We do actually have access to that information publicly here in the UK. And the reason that this car has a personal connection for me, some of my earliest memories of the Matra Rancho is having one sat on our drive when I was a very, very small kid, and I never saw it running. It was one of my dad's projects, and he was always talking about how he was going to get it back on the road one day. And then one morning, in the early hours of the morning, we awoke to an almighty bang. And what had happened is that someone had actually driven into the lamppost that was in front of our house. And the lamppost had basically fallen square onto the top of the Rancho and basically destroyed it. So this, as you'll learn if you watch this video, it was based on a pickup truck, and it had like a weedy little 1.4 litre engine in it. Very badly, very poorly built things, very unreliable cars, and they had like this fiberglass body on the back, this like 4x4 SUV style body built on the back, which was also quite fragile, also held moisture against the metalwork, which meant that they were very prone to rust. Like I say, terrible car. And yeah, it had basically the lamppost had basically fallen square on this fiberglass shell and completely destroyed it, totaled it. And that was the end of that car. Now, the cool thing about that car is that I was nearly born in that car, in a Matra Rancho, because it was my parents' one and only vehicle when I was born. And this was, my mum went into labour in the very early hours of the morning, like 2 o'clock in the morning. In March, there was ice and snow on the ground, apparently, based on the story that they've told me in the past. And of course, it was my dad's job to get her to the hospital so I could be safely delivered into the world. And the Rancho actually broke down about 5 miles into their 10-mile journey. Now, my dad being an engineer and being mechanically minded, having worked on cars his whole life, had a toolbox in the car, and he actually managed to fix it and get it up and running again, and they made it to the hospital in the nick of time. But of course, back in those days, 1984, no mobile phones. It was the very early hours of the morning. There is a very, very real possibility that I could have been born in the back of a Matra Rancho. Really terrible car. Does have the distinction, apparently, according to Johnny Smith in this video, of being the first soft roader, or the first of these kind of things that look like rugged 4x4 sport utility type vehicles, but don't actually work off-road and are underpowered and not very well built. I will say my current vehicle is a Jeep Renegade with a 1.6 litre engine, and I think it might be a bit of a spiritual successor to this car as well. But it did have some interesting features, like, for example, you could get rear-facing child seats that went in the boot, so you could turn it into a 7-seater. And yeah, there's some other quite interesting firsts with the Matra Rancho as well. So it's quite an interesting car, despite the rubbishness of it, and pretty much sums up the kind of stuff that my dad was into back in those days. But yeah, anyway, that is the story of how I was nearly born in the back of a Matra Rancho, and I honestly thought that this was some kind of a dream or something, this car, because nobody's heard of them. And so to see a whole series dedicated to it on the Late Break Show on Johnny's channel is really, really nice to see. And this starts off with a really good documentary about the history of the car and kind of how it came to be, how it was all designed and engineered, and all of that stuff, the story behind it. And yeah, really, really enjoyed this. And there's a very interesting twist to this project as well that I don't want to give away if you are interested in these kind of big mechanical projects. The one that he has managed to acquire is unfortunately well beyond saving, but he has an idea for it and he's going to do something very, very cool with it. Will be back on the road in some form, at least looking original, but won't be original underneath. It will be massively upgraded and improved. And I am fully on board with this. And there's also another channel with the actual company doing the restoration, have their own YouTube channel as well. And they are going to be covering this on their channel as well. So anyway, bit of a long-winded video of the week segment for you this week, but I hope you enjoyed this story. And there you go, my 3 videos of the week, and a very varied bunch this week. So we've got that video from Decino, all about soft locks in Doom and Doom 2, all those places you can get stuck in those games, seeing some very creative gameplay and stuff. A video from Jeff Geerling, all about CubeSats and launching stuff into space if you have the money, and if not, how you can communicate with stuff that other people have launched into space, which is cool. And yeah, a project on a very rubbish car that nobody's heard of that has a very, very personal connection indeed to myself. So I hope you enjoy those. They will all be linked down in the usual places in the description if you are watching this on YouTube, or indeed in the show notes if you're listening on your favourite podcast platform. That's video of the week, or indeed videos of the week. And so, sadly, as is always the case with these rambles every single week, our time together now must come to a close. But I do have one more story for you. This has been sent to me by a few people, including a real-life friend of mine as well. So that's always nice. And this did tickle me, I must say. So this is all about trains, and it's all about a particularly British gripe that we have here, something that we're going to be dealing with very much as autumn starts to creep its way into our lives in that way that it is currently doing. This is a train, a new train, which apparently has been named in my honour. So thank you ever so much for that, British public. This is a story over on BBC News website. Control-Alt-D-Leaf blows away competition as new leaf-busting train name. Control-Alt-D-Leaf. I like the design on this train as well. It's got this kind of 70s kitchen design. I don't even know what you'd call that. 70s kitchen curtain design, I guess. So this is a story by John Maguire. There are 4 words guaranteed to cause despair and derision among commuters waiting on a railway platform. Leaves on the line. They are known for causing significant annual delays and prompt discussion about how a country can be considered functioning if it can't deal with some damp foliage. Every autumn for the past 25 years, Network Rail has sought to remedy this by sending out a fleet of specialist trains to clear the tracks with high-pressure water jets. Now the public have voted to name one of these specialist trains. The shortlist included Leaf for Weapon, oh I like that, Pulp Friction, and the Autumn Avenger. I wouldn't be surprised to hear that Trainee McTrainface was probably on that list as well, although it doesn't get a mention here. But the winner was Control-Alt-D-Leaf. D-Leaf. Control-Alt-D-Leaf. These specialist trains, known as multi-purpose vehicles, are also capable of laying a sticky solution laced with sand to help train wheels grip the metal track. It's a huge issue, said Tom Desmond from Network Rail. It has become a joke, hasn't it? Calling it leaves on the line and the reason we can delay trains. But for us, the reason it causes all these delays is because it makes the rails really slippery. All the leaf fall that comes down makes it a real challenge to run the railway on time. Do other countries have this problem? Leaves on the line? Or is this a peculiarly British thing? I get the feeling we're being hoodwinked a bit here. I mean, you know, pretty much the entire planet has trees of some description and trains of some description. So you would think that this would be a solved problem, but it is a very, very much a huge problem here in the UK. Trains being delayed and even cancelled due to leaves on the line. Anyway, that's a bit of a rant. I'm actually not a regular rail commuter, I will say, but any opportunity I get to moan about our rail system is very much appreciated. So, yeah, the story just goes on to explain some stats and some figures and things. So these MPVs run twice a day and cover 1.2 million miles of railway. And they also spray weed killer and cut down trees by the rail side. I will say, actually, I live by a railway at the moment, and we saw a train come by. I don't know if I actually mentioned this. We saw a train come by late at night one night, and it had like these lasers shining out of it, I think is the only word. So actually coming down the track, because there was like this laser that was just like shining up in the air. And we came to the conclusion that maybe they were scanning for like overhanging trees or something. Obviously, this was at night. Yeah, that's just reminded me of that. Anyway, perhaps that's one of these as well. So yeah, Tim Dunn, a rail historian and writer, helped judge the naming competition. And of course, he goes on to say about the whole leaves on the line thing. Control-Alt-Delete won with 50% of the public vote. Oh, there we go. Leafy McLeafface and Trainee McTrainface were proposed, but were not allowed. Fun police out in force. Anyway, there we go. So in the 200-year history of the railway, all the famous trains have been named, from the Rocket to the Flying Scotsman and the Mallard, and this follows in the footsteps of that. Control-Alt-Delete. Evidently named in my honour, I must say, after my main YouTube channel, Control-Alt-Reese. Of course, nearly forgot the name of my own channel there. Anyway, that's all I have for you for this week's Ramble, so thank you ever so much for joining me. And of course, all that's left is to say a big thank you to my Discord community for providing some of the stories in this week's Ramble. In particular, Rich, DBK, Technic, Hardly Morgan 71, Gravitone, and Manemo, as always. Some of the usual suspects there. And of course, if you want to come and join us on the Discord server, if only to lurk and see what we're talking about, but also, of course, you're more than welcome to join in with the conversation. There is a link to that down in the description. That's the only way I can accept story submissions, I'm afraid. It would be too much to keep track of if people were emailing them to me and stuff. But yeah, hopefully that's okay. And of course, this Reese Rambles goes out every week at 2 minutes to midnight on a Friday night. If I remember, I am well aware that the past couple of weeks I have actually forgotten to schedule it and have woken up in the early hours of the morning and thought, yeah, I should probably release my podcast, shouldn't I? I'll try to do it properly this week, I promise. But this goes out 2 minutes to midnight on YouTube, on my second channel, youtube.com/Reese Rambles, or indeed on all of the podcast platforms. Just search for Reese Rambles on there and you will find it. You want any more information on any of these stories that I have featured, of course, they are linked down in the description and also in the show notes on your podcast platform. But that's all I have for you for this week, so thank you ever so much for joining me. Thanks again to my Discord community for all of the conversation around these stories. And yeah, that's all I got for you. All that's left is to say bye.